Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Hey guys, Youth Worker on Fire, good to see you, all you Youth Worker Nation people. Today we're going to talk about perfectionism. You can see already I'm stumbling over my words and I'm not speaking perfectly. I've kind of learned over the years to do some things, whether they're perfect or not. In fact, when I got into podcast world, I found out that if you're going to wait till things are done perfectly, you're never going to get them done. There's people who've talked. I've gone to conventions, podcast conventions, where they're going, oh, yeah. This is my fourth or fifth podcast, Podfest, or whatever convention, and someday I'm going to start my podcast. And there's others of us, like my friend Michael Helms and myself, that said, you know what? I heard about this podcast thing. Okay, here's how to do it. Okay, I'm going to dive in. I'm going to do this thing. And so we dove in. In fact, when I first started, I'd already learned about perfectionism. I won't quote this right because I'm just talking to you. Okay, you can go look it up for yourself. But the first time I heard this was when Dr. John Maxwell said it on one of his audio casts, where you could get recordings sent to you, things like that, And so I was listening to one of the recordings, and I'd seen Dr. Maxwell live and read a lot of his books and things like that. And he said this that caught my attention, being a Southern boy and hearing the phrase over and over and over, once again, not from my dad, but from many other people. Hey, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And meaning basically somebody's let them down. Somebody said they would do something for them. We've all had that happen, right, guys, girls? All had that happen where we've delegated something out and they either just didn't do it, or they decided it wasn't worth it. They weren't being paid. They were volunteers, or even if they were being paid, that they still dropped the ball, knowing that they weren't going to lose their job because of it or something like that. So they just didn't take it seriously enough. And so when I heard Dr. Maxwell say this to, I believe it was a bunch of students in Singapore. It could have been there. It could have been one other place, because he's all over the place. And he said this: perfectionism is the destroyer of dreams. Now, I looked it up. He's not the only person who said that sort of thing. And I've seen some other authors here. You can go look it up. Just type in perfectionism is the destroyer of dreams, and then just open up your internet. I'm looking at it right now on my phone, and you'll see different people that have written about that, psychologists and other authors and people who are just kind of looking at themselves, people in ministry, people in business. And if you have done any kind of thing that requires a lot of work, a lot of attention, a lot of different moving parts, if you don't want it done quickly enough, you get people that are better at it than you to do the parts that you cannot do well. It took me a long time, way too long, to learn that. I had a secretary for about 20 years. In the last stint I had for 29 years in one church, and thank you, Pat Sword, for being there. And she was there. And I had other secretaries before, and they were very good too. But Pat lasted 20 years. She's still at that church in 2019. And I've been gone from there 5 years now. And, she would really, I would type a letter, take me 3 hours to get through a letter, to type it. I'd give her a script or just something I'd scribble down about, okay, you need to type this out and send it out in an email, or to get it out in the calendar form or whatever it was. And she'd take 15 minutes. If it was a letter, it's 10, 15 minutes. Boom, it was done. And sometimes she could do it faster than that. And I was wasting hours trying to do something that I wasn't good at, sometimes because I knew it overloaded her, and so I would try to take up the slack, but it wasn't helping her. It wasn't helping me, because she's still having to clean up my mess that I had done trying to help her. But But I love this phrase that I saw that other people had written here. Trying to see if I can find that one author. My wife will tell you that I say author wrong. Probably do. Arthur, author, Uther. Okay. And so he says, perfectionism is an impossible thing to reach. He's right. Can't reach perfectionism because we're not perfect people. We don't live in a perfect world. God is perfect. He can reach perfectionist state. He is perfection. He is perfect love. He's perfect creator, all those things. But yet, because of free will, and people will argue that I've just said free will, we live in an imperfect world because mankind chose different things and sent us down a different path. So perfectionism is not achievable. But what is achievable is excellence. Because you can be excellent, and that doesn't mean that it's perfect. That just means it's excellent. It's about as high as you can go in the human form and make something happen. But in order to form excellence, that means you've got to have people that do certain moving parts better than you do it. My oldest son, Ryan James Edwards, in fact, my theme song is one of his original creations, is a songwriter. He's also a great musician. He's also a singer, which some people say musicians and singers are all musicians. I went to college in music, and so we kind of separate the two, but at the same time, the voice is an instrument, but he can do all those things. Now, I had a little bit of a talent, and I tried to write some, and I wrote some songs, different things like that, but it was very difficult. They weren't very good. And my wife, she's one of these people that us music majors love to hate. I love you, honey. Don't hate you, but it's just the idea that she is a great singer. If people are going to ask somebody to sing, and if they had a choice between her and me, they're going to choose her. When she was in college, she majored in education, but she was in all these different performance groups. Before we got married, that's how we met, was a performance group that I started becoming a part of. And she's always the preferred voice. And great voices attract. So people with great voices, women especially, would be attracted to each other there, and they would, as far as the music, and they would sing together, and they had some fabulous stuff, and they would throw me a bone by letting me sing with them, occasionally. And my wife and I did duets for a long time until she realized, this is too hard. You are hard to work with. So, but my son Ryan, he writes music. He writes great music. He's written a lot of music. Very hard to get into the music writing world. But if he had tried to focus on being the perfectionist and doing everything right, he would have never created the first album. In fact, he was with a lot of different bands, tried to get those guys to write some, and they did not want to stick with the writing. He found that he was doing all the work. He'd have to coax them into writing. He'd have to try to get them, out of bed sometimes. Come on, guys, come on, you got to get up. Let's start writing. And he ended up, even the engineer who in Lincoln, Nebraska, who is still his engineer in Nashville, Tennessee now, to record music, would see that he was the driving force to make the music happened. So he's writing music now, and he's getting ready to do his third album. I think within a year he'll have his third album out. He's on Spotify right now, iTunes, and iTunes is no longer going to exist pretty soon, so you'll find him on Apple Music, that sort of thing. You'll find him on YouTube and various other places that you can find music. You'll find his music, the 808. Yeah, I'm giving him a plug here. Ryan James Edwards, the 808. That's his first album. It's still the 808 Project, but his second album is called Bad, in parentheses, Looks Good on You. Bad is the name of the album. And great stuff. But this third album I'm so excited about. But here's the deal. He wrote all the moving parts. He could do it. He was a great percussionist. He's a great guitarist. He can play keyboards. He is a great vocalist. He never thought he was. His mom and I knew that we heard it in him, and it took him till he was out of his second or third, fourth band, and in his early 20s before he realized, you know what, I can sing this stuff. I can do this. Got him a recording soundboard. to hook up to his Mac computer, which we got him. We got all of our kids Mac computers because they're the creative computer. You can do anything that you can do with a PC with them. They, in our opinion, my opinion, a lot safer as far as internet, that sort of thing. And plus, you can get a lot more creativity stuff because the one reason I went Mac all the way was because when I would buy a Mac, I didn't have to buy a lot of extra moving parts to make sure I could start recording video, audio immediately. You can always upgrade and get other things, but if I wanted to just buy a Mac and start, boom, I could do it. So he writes all those parts, but when he produces his album, he goes to his engineer, Riley. And Riley was in Lincoln, Nebraska. Then he ended up in L.A. He created L.A. sound, learned the L.A. sound engineer sound there. Some people wanted him in Nashville because they wanted that kind of L.A. feel in Nashville. He's doing really well there. He salvaged Ryan's first album. The engineer that helped him raise money, though, all things turn, everything works for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And Ryan's buddy that he had performed with on the road or done some grunt work with in their band decided to be an engineer too. Well, come to find out he wasn't that good of an engineer. And so, but what he was good at talking Ryan into showing him how to raise money to do his first album. So he did that. It was a disaster in that studio. He called Riley, "What should I do here? This is a disaster. I can't put this out." He said, "Listen, send me the material. I'll see if I can fix it. I'll fix the first one. If you don't like what I've done, I'll find you somebody that can, because I should have warned you that you need to come to me or somewhere else." And so he fixed it. Did a very good job with a very bad situation. So all these moving parts started working. Then he moves to Nashville, does a second album, and Ryan now could play all the parts, and he did all the parts. Riley loves to work with him because he has all the parts written and the vocals. But Ryan is smart enough to know that there's always better musicians. There's always a better engineer, even though he can do some real good work on his own in his office at his house. In fact, I like the stuff that he did last. It's like you almost don't need a whole lot other stuff. I mean, all the moving parts you've done yourself, and they sound great. I'm pretty critical as a musician. Maybe I'm prejudiced as a dad. I don't know. So, but he will go to Riley anyway, and Riley does a great job. He brings in better musicians to play the guitar parts, better musicians to play the percussion parts. He may bring in some backup vocals, and they will collaborate together and find out, okay, well, maybe we need to change this part and that part. And there's a show on now, Songland, I think is what it's called, where they're getting these songwriters a chance, and great artists will come in and choose one of the songs. And when they come in with the song's pretty good, but then they have these other great songwriters that are well known in the industry, and they go in and help them change some of the song to where it will be better, and the songs go from good to beyond good to excellent. What we're talking about there, not perfect, excellent. And then the artist will go, okay, we love that. We're going to do that. I see my style in what you guys have done now that you've fixed the song some. So the same thing happens whether it's sports. The same thing happens whether it's businesses. I listened to a guy by the name of John Lee Dumas, JLD, on EO Fire. It's a business podcast. And so I listen to that. I listen to the business podcast because he talks about having someone that does a lot of his day-to-day stuff that's mundane, the letter writing, keeping up with Facebook and Instagram. Probably by the time this comes out, Facebook will probably almost nothing anymore. I mean, it's been close, I know that, and some real disruptions there. And Snapchat, different things like that. And he's got this lady in the Philippines, and it's helping support her family, and he's paying her what they would pay well for in the Philippines, but it's like nothing here. And he has his girlfriend, Kate. She does a lot of publicity, different things like that. He has Libsyn, which I also use to distribute all of his podcasts to all these different platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on radio.com. Pandora now, iHeartRadio, all those, and that's the why? Because Libsyn is the best distributor out there. If you are thinking about a podcast, you need to go to Libsyn. It's Libsyn, Libsyn. And so if you are bent on being the perfectionist and spending all this time, realize this: you may perfection yourself to the point that you never release it. My son has some friends, a couple of brothers that they wrote one song. Ryan thought the song was good. They got it on iTunes, and then they took it off of iTunes and decided to make it better. And they sent it to him, and he said, "I don't like it as much. I liked it the other way." And that's the only song that they've really released in several years. And so he and many other writers know that they've got to write and get it out, write and get it out, write and get it out. And some are going to be duds and some are going to be good. But if you don't release it to the public, and sometimes the ones that you think are duds are the good ones. The same when it comes to student ministries. Sometimes you think the kids that you're spending time with or the families you're spending time with are duds and they're not going to do anything, and they'll be the ones that change the world and shake up the universe. Okay? And that are going to be politicians. One of the biggest disruptors in our high school, and I've got him on the interviews. Go listen to Anthony Sabatini. And Anthony is House of Representatives for the state of Florida now, probably one of the youngest people in the legislature in the House of Representatives. And so, but you'll see that he was not the guy that people I think would think that's what he would do. And he explains that in that particular podcast episode. So Anthony Sabatini. And so shout out to you, Anthony. Thanks for all you've done to be on our show and different things like that. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with you again for a while. But when you're thinking about, I got to do it myself, just realize that there are other people. In fact, my student ministry, I'm as ADD as they come. Jay Strack, who's also on the podcast episode, I believe Jay is 10 and 11, something like that, part 1, part 2. And he has created a thing called Rock the Universe. It is amazing. He's created Youth Pastor Summit, which for free every year at Universal Studios in Orlando at Rock I can't even think of the place right now, Hard Rock Cafe, which holds about 1,800, but for some way we end up with about 2,300 people in there, and there's always people waiting outside wishing they could get in for that first day, and it's a 2-day thing for free because he raises the money and believes in youth pastors, and he'll say it, he's as ADD as they come, and I'm ADD as well, but he will put himself out there and pull together teams to do all these things. He's a great speaker. He's a great communicator, but he realizes that unless he has a team behind him to make these things happen, it's not going to happen well. It's not going to reach excellence. And it's going to take too long. It's just going to take too long. Don't let your ego get in the way. I've had friends tell me that. Doug, you're letting your ego get in the way. Why? I didn't even recognize it. So listen to your friends, listen to your spouse, listen to some people, and then sometimes you just got to throw it away too and go, I can listen to you guys all day, but you're holding me back. Sometimes you've got to just say, okay, yes, I've heard what you're saying, but I've got to move forward. And the key is move forward. Put yourself out there. Release a podcast. So what if it's bad? Start a new podcast. Write a book. Everybody's got a book in them. I hear people say all the time, I could write a book. And here's what I say now. I've written 2 books. They're not published yet. I get it. I've been I've got all kinds of flaws, and that's one of them. But I did release a podcast. This is, going to be episode 83, 84, 85. I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be one of those because we got 82 episodes out right now. And I am the guy who cannot stand looking bad. I'm the guy who wants to look excellent and all that. But I found that if I'm going to get these materials out, I cannot wait till the day before I die or something like that. I mean, I'm getting older now, and I spent a lot of years doing this, but the information's got to get out. And maybe my information's not perfect for you, but it's perfect for someone. I'll never forget, and I'll say a lot of these stories over and over because the stories are great. And it's about an assembly that I was holding in schools, and there's multiple times over the years that we would go to the superintendent of schools. At that time, now they kind of block you from it. It's almost like getting into the White House, but we'd go to official people, principals, and all that. But we tried to start at the top so that we had all of our bases covered, and we'd bring great communicators in. And one was Reggie Dabbs, and I'll never forget being at a high school in Sumter County, Florida. And the school looked like the teachers and principal and administrators were not trying to really calm them down, or they were not used to calming them down, or they were sorry the assembly was there and they didn't want it there because it's disrupting classes, and that happens a lot. Teachers especially give principals a hard time. And I'll never forget, he was in the assembly. It was really going bad. They'd introduced him. Nobody's listening. And finally, Reggie shouts out, "Hey, shut up," or something like that. But he just shouted as loud as he could go. And he said, "Listen, I'm not here for everybody today." He said, "But I'm here for somebody. And somebody needs to hear what I've got to say. So the rest of you, just zip it. Keep your mouth closed so that somebody can hear what I got to say. You don't have to listen, but you just keep your mouth closed." And the whole gymnasium, which was packed, was silent. And he spoke. And afterwards, 10, 15 students came up to him, and each one of them said, "I was that one person. I was the person that you needed to talk to today." Well, Reggie could have said, "You know what, this is not a perfect assembly. You guys did not really do a good job. I'm not going to do this assembly. These people are rude to me. I'm going to walk away." Instead, he let us handle all of the elements, the contacting of the superintendents and the principals, and we're setting it up and the sound and all these things. He showed up expecting those things to be done. It still wasn't a perfect situation, but he made it an excellent situation, and all of us working together made it an excellent event. I've been talking about that event for a decade. And so take a chance. Hide your pride, push it back, let God take over. Don't wait too late. Maybe you don't need to move too soon, but that's usually not our problem. There's guys that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because they waited too late because they were afraid or because of their ego. And when they put their stuff out there that needed to be out there, they made hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they realized they had lost hundreds of thousands that they would have had more of if they'd just launched sooner. Perfectionism is the destroyer of dreams. Perfectionism is an impossible thing to reach. The God of the universe, through Jesus Christ, He is perfection. And remember, the scripture says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. But also there is the scripture that says, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. And what those of us who have depended on God and seen ourselves fail over and over, and when we would give it over to Him, we would realize that, you know what? Every time I give it to God, it seems to work. Because it's not by might, not by your might, it's not by your power, but it's by His Spirit. It's by His Spirit. A guy by the name of Mark Batterson said that Well, you're going to have to look that up yourself, because I'm not perfect today, and I forgot what the quote was, but Mark's got some good stuff too. So just remember this. By the way, let me tell you, this is the first thing I put out. I don't know if you can see that, Youth Worker on Fire. Okay. And this card was at Podfest, and Libsyn, Libsyn, company that puts out our podcasts. They want a card, and I'd done this for another convention because they said, yeah, get as large a one as you can, because, in fact, it was Youth Pastor Summit, because they will see it and do something about it and listen to it. But when I sent it to them to use for the convention, for podcasts or Podfest, they said, oh, man, these are too large. We need something smaller. And so this wasn't perfect enough for that one event. And so my buddy Michael Helms, who also is my engineer for a long time, probably 78, 79 of my episodes, no, about 78 of them actually got out because of Michael. And then he created this card, gave it to me as an event. My son Ryan helped me with the other card there. And also the Simpsons, Dean Simpsons, not the Simpsons, Dean Simmons, with his printing company, helped do the larger card and print that. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate all you and Teresa have done for me and my family. And so anyway, picture of my daughter. She just had her first baby, by the way. Yeah. She's my girl. All right. Yeah. And those of you in podcast world can't see the picture that just showing. She's real young. And it's our poodle, Ginger, the first dog that we had. Now we have big dogs. And so, guys, that's it for this episode. Don't wait to be perfect. You can't be perfect, but pull a team together so you can be excellent and so you can move quickly. The quicker you move with most things, the better your results, because you're not spending all your time worrying about how perfect or imperfect things are. Move, execute, let God do his thing, let people who are better than you do your thing. It took 5 volunteers on a regular basis just to keep me organized most of the time, my 35 years in student ministries. I probably need more people now, more than that, to just keep me organized, keep me going. This is Youth Worker on Fire, Doug Edwards. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.